Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to show you the top 10 most OG Ark Tames. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we have got the Moser, and this creature is here for many reasons, namely that it kind of changed the shape of the ocean biome back in those early stages of Ark, as I'm pretty confident this wasn't really hugely accessible in the early stages of the game. At least I didn't really get into it until like 2016, but I'm not sure if they're around on launch or not. I only really remember the Megalodons as sea creatures. I might again just be slightly wrong on those facts, but either way this creature was very influential. It's very big and you have a lot of memories with this creature, and obviously with that platform saddle as well, it added something new and innovative. I know the plesiosaur did have that as well. There was actually quite a big thing when that creature came out as well, so I guess it's of a similar era to that, and it just really changed the ocean biome in a way. And nowadays it is definitely quite outdated, but back then it was such a cool creature and I still have a memory of it, and it really is one of the OGs. Next up we have got the Casteroides, and this creature is here because when it came out I just used this thing so much, and with that smithy as its platform saddle, like, I just really liked that feature. It seems really cool, new and innovative to me. Not sure if the RG did have it at the time, but this definitely did have it back when it released. They also could swim pretty fast as well, and although I didn't spend too much time in the water back then in those days, I still did enjoy going around and just exploring the underwater aspects of the game occasionally, and it was just nice to have a speedy-ish way of travel as well. And obviously that wood gathering was really on point, and also just a general travel mount across the map as well. I did use this for, and for storage as well, as their weight was pretty good. I just really liked this creature as well, just to generally like have it, because I tended to collect a lot of creatures back then, and whenever a new one came out I would always have to tame that. You kind of say this is on a similar level to the Procoptodon and that sort of OG nostalgia from that kind of creature. So like, yeah, I have so many nice fond memories of this creature, and for me it's one of the OGs. It's a bit forgotten about nowadays, but it definitely does deserve some attention, as you can get quite a significant amount of use out of something like this. Next up we have got the Stegosaurus, and I remember when I first tamed one of these things and it took me over 2 hours back then, once obviously it had been knocked out. So you know, it really did take quite a bit of time back in the days, but that was mainly just because the rates were lower, and I think the game did have quite a drastic change when the UI update and all of that happened in terms of rates. So you know, the game has just become a lot easier since then, but that was ages ago, and obviously back in these times that was before the UI update. Also, just to mention, do you prefer the new UI or the old UI? Because I'm not talking about ASA UI, by the way, I'm just talking about Ark UI versus like 2016, 2015, 2017 Ark UI. Like, that was actually still in SOTF until like late 2022, I think, when SOTF obviously got the update. So you know, a lot of people probably would have experienced that UI at some point, but I just want to know your opinions on it. Do you like it? Do you not like it? There are some things which I do think are really nostalgic about it, and you know, that kind of does go for most things, but largely I'd say the new UI is better. And also, if you haven't realised already, the Stego has had significant amounts of TLC, because back then it was only really a berry gatherer, and yes, you could use it for doing all kinds of tanking. It's now an even better tank with those plate modes, obviously, but back then didn't have it. But still, it's so nice to see that Wildcard did give it some love with the TLC update, and it's revitalized this creature even more, as it is definitely a staple as one of those OGs, and you really can't forget the Stego when talking about general things in Ark. It just needs to be in every conversation with OG Ark creatures, and that is why I've put it on the list. Next up we have got the UT, and I have just such fond memories of this creature. I had to put it here on this list, and I didn't really use it for bosses too much back in the day with the Broodmother, before obviously its arena existed. You just fight it there on the Obelisk Terminal. But then when I kind of found out about these creatures and just started using them more, I really grew a lot of love for this creature, and still to these days I really do just like basically have to tame a UT. It's almost like just an impulse thing. It's like impulse buying stuff. It's like, oh yeah, you have to buy that. It's not like, obviously it's just, oh, you got to buy that because it's new and fresh. So I guess impulse buying maybe isn't the best way of saying it, but impulsive thoughts in a way. Like, you just, oh, first thing, yeah, have to get a UT. Obviously, it's not going to be the first thing you're doing, but, you know, it's widened to my brain, like some other creatures as well, which are later on this list as well, and they just pretty much have to qualify as an OG tame. Crame? What is a crame? Comment that down below. What do you think a crame is? Because I have no idea. My brain is all with imagining and creating words today. But yes, definitely does classify as an OG tame if it is that memorable to me, and obviously it has been in Ark for an absolute while, so you know it would make sense why it is definitely one of those OGs, and I really do think still to this day very useful creature, and back then very useful as well. Next up we have got the Megalodon, and this is kind of all I remember of the ocean biome really in those early stages of the Ark game. I'll get myself a Megalodon and just get out there and do some general ocean exploring. I can't remember if silica poles were even a thing back then. I'm not really sure, but it's probably muddle up of memories and all things. Actually, comment that down below. Were silica poles around in 2015? Because at this point, when going through things, like we are like eight years, isn't it now? Something like that. It's more than 8, isn't it? We're in 2024. Not quite 8. It will be 9 years in June. It's been a long time, so my brain's a bit muddled up. You can probably tell by the it's the OG though, like it's the Megalodon. Everyone knows what the Megalodon is. It's that big shark, and to have it in a dinosaur game makes sense. Everyone just kind of knows what it is. Also had received a TLC update as well since its release, so it's nice to see that Wildcard has shown this creature some love as well, and in my opinion it's surprisingly underrated nowadays, and there's an X variant on Gen 1, so if you have Gen 1, definitely recommend Taming Megalodon there. Don't know why I said definitely twice, but you know, intensify the intensifier, as they say. In at number 5, we have got the Baryonyx, and this creature is here because I just remember doing caving with these things back in the day. Obviously, they weren't the oldest creature in the book in terms of Ark stuff. I'm pretty sure they came around a lot later when Swamp Biome and Redwoods Biome were introduced, but I still have really strong, kind memories with these creatures, and to this day, they're pretty much the only creature I use for caving. I know there are probably some better options out there, like the Shadowmane, or quite a lot of people did use Sabres. I actually did use Sabres quite a lot. Very nice OG creature. Not on this list, but you know, give it a quick mention if you were thinking Sabres. I've given the Sabre a brief mention. You can also have the Thyla as well, although I don't really have many OG memories with that creature. I do more so with the Baryonyx, which is obviously why the Baryonyx is on the list at this spot. But it's just, you know, so many fond memories with this creature. Just used it so much, not just for caving but for general travel, and not sure if they did have that spin ability when they were first introduced, because I don't really remember using all too much of it, but I'm also not really sure if they even would have got any kind of TLC, but they might have at some point. Again, not really sure. Comment that down below. My knowledge is really failing me. I should do an update at some point. It's like I'm giving you information on these creatures and I don't really have much information myself when going back this far. Really should have done a bit more research. Now, when the Quetz was introduced, which I'm confident is 2016, definitely not any later, and obviously definitely not any earlier, so I guess it kind of just has to be 2016. It really did change up the game for Ark. Like the fact you could get a platform saddle on a flying thing, and at that point flyer speed hadn't been nerfed yet, and I think they nerfed some other things as well, not just speed. I think they nerfed damage or something like that as well. Something happened at a point as well when everything got nerfed, but these were out, I'm pretty sure, pretty confident they were out before flyer speed leveling was obviously just not a thing anymore, and you could get some ripping fast Quetzals with some really cool bases on the back of them, and that would just be your way of cruising around the world. Again, such a game changer. It gave you a new perspective, and taming these things was an absolute pain back then, especially if you were doing it solo. But if you did have some friends, I guess it wasn't the worst thing, and if you were doing it solo, you could always use the RG and Pulmonoscorpius method, and if you just knew how to do it and you didn't really mess it up, then that was a surefire way to tame yourself a Quetzal. In at number 3, we got the Giga, or the Tiny Tim, whatever you want to call it. If you get the reference, put that down in the comments below on what the video was. Rest in peace, that series ended, I think, 1 or 2 episodes later, pretty much just without warning. If only we could have got more of that series. But you know, that is just how the YouTuber tends to work for that channel, you know. They don't really finish series, but they've said that they will more now. I don't know why I'm talking about that so much. Either way, let's just talk about the actual creature in hand, which is the Giga. And when the Giga hit the scene in 2016, again 2016 like the Quetzal, I think it was after, it may have been before as well, but I'm pretty confident after the Quetzal this thing dropped, and it was insane that we had this thing because it was just so big, and again it gave a new dimension to the world of Ark. And obviously the reason why it's not higher is because 2016, you know, it did come a lot later on in all of that, and this creature just, you know, it was so influential, but sadly obviously it basically just came a year too late to really make it into the top 2 spots for the OG Ark Tames. But it really did make such a big difference. And with all its abilities, even that Rage Meter was seen as really cool. It does definitely make it into the top 3. Really is a really cool OG creature. Now, from OG creatures and like pure nostalgia and all of that, I was tempted to put the Kano in at number 1. But for the sanity of all of you viewers out there, I did not do it. Because obviously, not everyone is a Kano addict like I am. And it's kind of like drugs for this thing. For me, I'm just like, this is just like the most OG creature in a way. But obviously I put a different creature in at number 1 to savour you from all those bad comments, even though there probably still is going to be a little bit of hate from this. Fine, you know, you might not really like the Kano, but this is my list and not your list. You're free to agree, you're free to disagree. I always say that I don't really mind on what your opinions are, and I think that all of them are really valid. Just want to make that clear. I know YouTubers say it all the time, but you know, I follow the same kind of policy. Either way, with this creature, I was using it pretty much from day 1. Obviously not from day 1 because the rates were so low back then. You would never be able to get a Kano then. But like, it was one of the first carnivores I got. I got Raptors first, but really not a very memorable creature to me. Didn't really like them that much. When I got my hands on a Kano, didn't even have the saddle, just had it following around. And obviously named it Connie Dave because of the same YouTuber with the Tiny Tim thing. So, you know, thanks for all of the memories. Just adds even more to the OG-ness. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. If not, this is going to sound all really confusing to you, and I'm sorry for that, but for all the people that do get it, they will definitely be enjoying this. Either way, talking about the Kano as well, this did get a TLC, which obviously it didn't have before, so now it has the bleed ability, which is a nice really thing to have. Shows wildcard did actually show some support for this creature. Just really like it. It's small, it's agile, it's got that nostalgia factor for me. Really is an OG. You can get so much use out of it, at least I can. Some people probably maybe won't agree with that because I prefer creatures like Aloes, and I do agree, they're really great, just I am a bit of a Kano addict. And in at number 1, we have got the RG, and this creature is here just because it is so memorable for its old model and also just for its use. Obviously now it's got its new model, and I'm pretty sure it had a lot of TLC done to it as well with that new ability or new abilities. I'm not actually sure if it did have the regen buff, but it does have the regen buff now, where you kill something and you eat the dead corpse and then boom, you've got that regen. And also the saddle acts as a portable smithy as well. Not really sure if they had that back in the day, but obviously they do now, and they can carry an extra small creature in their mouth as well, which they definitely didn't have back in the day. That was not a thing which you could do on the RG, at least I'm pretty confident. Really hope that I haven't got that wrong. But obviously they could pick up things in just the general claw position, and I think the way they pick up creatures is different on the new model to the old model, because like they used one arm there seemingly on the new model. I think on the old one it was both, because it kind of like grabbed around the shoulders. Again, the old RG model was pretty much just like a bird, but just at the back it was like a square with a couple of feathers, and those feather textures, man, brings a lot of nostalgia, but also brings a lot of maybe some off-brand RG models. You know, if it was still an Ark today, that would be a little bit concerning for the developers. I'd be like, why have you not updated this yet? Still, the nostalgia factor's there for it, obviously, and it's an insane resource gatherer and such a useful creature. It's got weight reduction on things like metal, crystal, and obsidian, and as a must-have, definitely is the OG. The top 10 classic Ark Tames. In at number 10, we have got the Raptor, and it is fair to say that a ton of these were tamed and used in those early days of Ark, and personally, myself, I did use quite a lot of them as well. On top of this, I did go through a fair few of them, and many people did as well. And when new players do kind of maybe think back on what Ark was like previously, they're probably going to think of things like Raptors and Rexes and Spinos and Carnos and Allos and things like that. By the way, the Allo is not appearing on this list, as far as I'm concerned, it is a later creature, although I should probably check that, but I will inform you further on in the video, because actually I'm not too sure on the chronology, and actually just checking, the Allosaurus was not around in 2015. The Alpha Carno, the Alpha Raptor, the Alpha Rex, the Angler, the Anki, the Aranio, and the RG were the only creatures beginning with A out in 2015. The fun facts we all know. Either way, this creature was extremely useful back in the day and got tons of use. Obviously, people didn't really care too much about its low weight and its somewhat slower speed than what some people would expect from these days of Ark. People didn't really seem to care as much about things like that. They were just so excited to get their hands on creatures. At least that was kind of my experience of it back then, and yeah, it really did do the job for me, and I got a lot of great use out of this creature, and it really is one of those great ones. And if you do have the time, still to this day, I would definitely recommend you get a Raptor, as they can be quite useful in the early game stages, as you have yourself a nice neat carnivore to use around the map. Next up, we have got the Beelzebufo, and this creature is here just because when it released, which I'm actually surprised to say is 2015. I had a look and I did some research on it because I thought this was more of a 2016 creature, but no, it was out in 2015. Kind of does make sense when I actually think back with all the chronology, and this creature really was heavily useful. Didn't use it for any kind of cement-based gathering. Not even sure if it could do that back in the days. Comment that down below, because I'm not too sure of its abilities and if it had a TLC at any point, but it was definitely widely used just for a really good travel mount. I used it a lot for underwater exploration back then, and you kind of put the Megalodon here as well on this list. It isn't appearing on the list, but I'm going to give it a brief mention, as the Megalodon was definitely a really nice classic Ark Tame, which I used quite heavily, but I did use this thing a lot, and in some ways it's more memorable because its release was quite striking. Like, I remember when this thing came out, I just really wanted to tame one, and I really enjoyed using it. I liked it's kind of like sort of playing a Mario game. That's how I looked at it. You're playing a Mario game, but it's Ark, because these things can jump around, jump like crazy, and do all those things. And the Procoptodon might have been out at this point, and you had that, but I just felt so much more free with this creature. Coming up next, we have got the Carnotaurus, and this creature is definitely a favourite of mine and has to be in the classic Ark Tames list. It was here from the beginning. Did, I think, have some sort of a model change at some point. And even back then, actually, I think the models looked really cool. And compared to like the RG and the old Rex model, it looked significantly less outdated, at least in my mind. Either way, pretty confident they have had a model update since then. Obviously, texture updates and things like that have happened throughout Ark's game just being developed, as it progressed from being a 2015 looking game to maybe more of a 2018, 2019 looking game in its kind of late stages, I would say, because it doesn't look like most of the games that you would get in 2015, especially for that kind of survival game. And also, if you didn't know already, this is the 2023 version of Ark, which is ASA for this B-roll here. You'll see it interchanging between the two types of game. So the Beelzebufo would have been the original Ark, and the Raptor and the Carno were in ASA. If you couldn't tell already, you could probably tell, because the graphics have significantly changed, haven't they? For the better, you could say, although the ghosting and the shadows like not really working properly are maybe not the best of things, but still, you know, it is overall a better looking game, and you know, it kind of makes you think back of those classic times. We are doing a classic Tames list after all. Also, if you were wondering, the Carno has had a TLC since release, so now it's even better than before, and it is ridiculously easy to tame on ASA. If you are actually playing ASA, there's pretty dead at the moment with the general player space, so you know, that's what that's like. But either way, Carno, still remember it so clearly to this day. Used it so much just as a general carnivore, even before I got that saddle, because obviously doing the levels was actually quite difficult back in the days to spend quite a lot of time. Really is a classic. Next up, we have got the Quetzal, and this creature is here because actually, surprisingly, when it released in 2015, thought it was more of a 2016 creature, but again, there's another creature on this list which is later on, which I also thought was a 2016 creature, but no, it is still a 2015 creature. It just came out later in the year, of course, and when looking at creatures like this, it really did change the Ark space. Like, the amount of use that you got out of this creature, especially with that platform saddle, was insane. It was just so cool to fly these things around, and it was again a new perspective on the game. You could build the base on the back of a flyer, and because flyer speed leveling hadn't been nerfed at that time, you could get these things traveling at insane speeds, and it was so fun to go around the map with your mates and just absolutely dominate metal farming, because that's what I use this for. Wasn't really a PvP player. If you were thinking that I was going to say dominate the map, didn't really use them for that, but metal farming was so easy with these things, and just general transportation of goods was so easy, and it was nice to have a nice base and sometimes a taming trap on the back of one of these things. The Dodo is here next, and could I really make a top 10 classic Ark Tames video without actually including the Dodo on the list? Come on, it is the Dodo after all. Probably one of the first creatures, if not the first creature you're going to see in Ark, and everyone when they started in 2015 tamed yourself a Dodo at some point. They were so easy. Still took 15 minutes to tame, because yes, taming took absolutely ages. At least mine felt like 15 minutes to tame. Probably might have been 5, could have been 10. Either way, you punch these things out and you feed them some berries. I might have not even been feeding these things medjos, maybe that's why it just took so long. And yes, you have yourself the cute Dodo friend, and the Dodos are definitely a classic Ark Tame, and it could not be a classic Ark Tames list without including these things here. They really do add something to Ark, even though maybe not the most widely used creature, they have to be on this list. In at number 5, we have got the Pteranodon, and this creature is here just because it was so useful to get up into the air that early on in the game, and it really felt like something so special to get up and fly in the air. It was like the biggest achievement in the Ark game. I probably should have put this thing a little bit higher than the number 5 spots, not in the number 1 spot. We're not that close to the end of the list yet. We're halfway in, guys. Either way, these creatures, they just made such a mark on your Ark progress, and you could just speed up everything so much with a Pteranodon. You're like, oh yeah, this is all fine now because I have a Pteranodon. And it was such a pain once you lost it somewhere because you died and you just spent ages going back to get it. Why, you always have a spare Pteranodon at home, and then you can have the other one to follow you once you're heading back, obviously with a spare saddle on it. Otherwise, they are pretty much useless as creatures. Like, you need the saddle to really use this creature effectively. It's not like the Carno, or, you know, in some cases like Rexes and Gigas and things like that, where you can have them following you around. No, you really do need the saddle to get the use out of this creature, and actually getting that chitin or keratin, whatever you preferred. I got loads of keratin for the saddle back in the day, but now thinking about it, I should have just got loads of chitin, as killing all of those insects is so much easier than going around and killing loads of carb enemies. Another pretty classic creature in my eyes, although not on the list, but you know, again, I'll give it a brief mention here. And the Pteranodon was so easy, so simple to tame, and just made your progress and just your general Ark life so much better that it has to be included on this list, and people still use it tons to this day, and it really is uncompetable in the level range that you are when you're taming one of these things. Next up on the list, we have got the Tiny Tim, and obviously the Tiny Tim has to be on the list. Again, surprised that Tiny Tim came out in 2015. I thought it was 2016 as well, but it kind of just makes sense that the birth of Tiny Tim did happen in 2015. Originally called the Giganotosaurus, soon after named the Tiny Tim, of course, by Ibalistic Squid and Ashdub, if you didn't know the reference already. And the Tiny Tim was capable of dealing just so much damage. You felt on top of the world, and you could decimate any single creature, especially things like Spiners and Rexes. They felt like small little puny critters to the Tiny Tim. You felt like an absolute demolition king, being able to just destroy everything in your path, that being trees, that being creatures, even sometimes the oceans, which you might not expect out of these creatures, considering you might not think they're the best swimmers. They're not really, but they can go through rivers like it's nothing, because most of the time their feet are touching the bottom, and like you can see there, it just crosses that like it's nothing. It essentially just walks along all of it, and they're just so OP, so big, and they really did make such a nice effort to contributing to the evolution of Ark, and they're just so successful as a creature. I really did have to put them in on the list. In at number 3, we have got the Rex, and this creature is here just because Ark probably wouldn't be Ark without the Rex. And when thinking of dinosaurs in general, you often do think of creatures like this. Obviously, the Rex is probably like one of the most popular dinosaurs, well-known dinosaurs to date in the world. Like, everyone just knows what this creature is, and everyone will use this creature really in their Ark progress. It is such a great boss creature, and when the Broodmother was a thing, I'm pretty sure it was out at roughly release, but it might have not been. I think it came a little bit afterwards. Definitely still a 2015 thing. You'd gather up those Rexes and then you'd go and fight the Broodmother. You could use a wealth of other creatures as well. I did use things like Carnos and Spinos as well. Really were the goats of the boss defeating world back then. You wouldn't really have any Daedons or UTs, but still, you would really just pack a punch against those bosses. And also, actually just for general use around the map, I did use the Rex quite a lot in those early days. I don't really do it anymore, as there are some better options out there. But back then, the Rex was just one of those goats that you'd use everywhere for just getting any kind of damage done. You just bring the Rexes along with you, even if you, again, you didn't have the saddles for them, if you weren't obviously a high enough level, or if you just didn't have the resources to craft the saddle. Probably more or less the first one, because the Rexes, in all fairness, weren't actually too difficult to tame. Yes, the time commitment to taming one was quite large, but once you had the tranks, and if you like trapped them in a cliff or something like that, or you just like stood on top of a cliff really and then just shot it from down below, it was a pretty easy secured tame with no issues whatsoever, as long as there wasn't too many hostile things in the area. In at number 2, we have got the RG, and not only is this thing nostalgic for its old model, but just also its tremendous use back in the day, and the upgrade of getting an RG over the Pteranodon was insane, especially considering you could level up that speed and get it even faster than something like a Pteranodon with not too much effort. And then from that, you'd have much better weight and much better stamina, of course, and you could just take these things around the map with absolute ease, and you could get loads of stuff on them with no risk of being encumbered. They could also pick up a wider range of creatures too, and if you paired it with an Anki or a Dodic, then you'd really net yourself with some great harvesting power, and you could just put loads of these resources onto the RG, and it was such a great time. Not sure if they did have weight reduction back in the day, or a smithy as a saddle, or even that regen buff. They might have received quite a huge amount of TLC when obviously they got the model update and all of that. But actually, I do want you to comment that down below, because strangely, for a creature that I use so much and that I used so much in those very early days of Ark, I don't really know what ability it strictly had back then, and I do want to know for sure. It did not carry creatures in its mouth as an extra thing, but obviously it can do that now if you want to carry your pet dodo around on your adventures and really let it see all the sights that the world has to offer in Ark. And in ASA you can do it again, but with some better graphics and some lower FPS. As always, Ark performance descended. And finally, in at number 1, we have got the Spino, and this creature for me really just did invoke a lot of incitement in me, and as a general creature I felt it to be bigger and more powerful than the Rex, and with its added mobility as well, I thought it was just fabulous, and with that water mobility as well, really truly great creature. Back in the days it did not have the hydration buff, at least I'm pretty sure it didn't, and it didn't have the ability to go up on its hind legs, and I'm not sure if it had oxygen then and doesn't have oxygen now, or didn't have oxygen then and now has oxygen. It's one of those combinations. It has received quite a little bit of change since its release, obviously with an updated model as well. At least I'm pretty confident that there was an updated Spino model. Most of the models did actually really get updated in Ark as they went through the change of updating all the UI, but just this was like the go-to creature for me. I wanted a Spino, and when I tamed one, I was definitely not disappointed, and I vastly prefer these things to the Rexes in like every way. and I would use these things for doing bosses, I would use these things for everything I would use a Rex for, and it kind of made the Rex reasonably redundant for me, as I didn't really think too much about, oh, how much, like, health does it really have relating to how much damage and how balanced of a creature it is to make it really good at dealing with all of those bosses. I didn't think of things like that. I was just like, whatever does more damage, and the Spino tended to do more damage, at least from the ones that I tamed back in the day, and I vastly preferred its underwater travel and just general mobility. I felt it to be a much more widely useful creature, and that is why I simply had to put it on this list. It just is such a successful creature for me, and in my opinion, it is the most classic Ark Tame out there. Obviously, for you, it may be different, but for me, this is just the absolute GOAT of classic Ark Tames, and it has no competition for me whatsoever, just none at all. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all did enjoy, as I very much did enjoy making it. As always, comment down below, what is the most classic Ark Tame to you? If you didn't agree with the list, put your 10 most classic Ark Tames in the comments below, and I'll see you all later.